My state of North Carolina has 15 electoral votes, 13 congressmen plus 2 senators. The presidential election is not official until the electors meet 3 weeks after the election to cast their ballots. And usually what happens, if a particular state votes for one candidate, the electors for that candidate get the right to cast the ballot. You could win a state by 1 vote, just 1 vote, and all of that state's electoral votes go to the candidate that won by 1 vote. In other words, it's not proportional, and that has created some problems. So let's take a look at the numbers. Altogether, there are 538 electoral votes. A majority is 270. The candidate who achieves this majority is the president. In 2020, all 435 members of the House of Representatives will be up for election. Currently, there are 235 Democrats, 199 Republicans. Now, for those of you who are good in math, you will know that that's 434, not 435, because we're missing 1 congressman from my district in North Carolina because there was voter fraud in my district. So there'll be a new election. But the Senate is different. Unlike the House, where members are elected every 2 years, in the U.S. Senate, the members are elected once every 6 years, which means every 2 years, about 1/3 of the Senate is elected. So, 100 members of the Senate, remember each state has 2, so 50 states times 2 is 100. Currently, we have 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, 2 independents. On almost all issues, these 2 independents vote with the Democrats, so it's really a 53-47 breakdown. Next year, 12 Democratic seats and 22 Republican seats are up for election. And of course, the big question is, with Republicans defending many more seats, will that provide Democrats an opportunity to gain control of the U.S. Senate? Personally, I don't think so, because many of these Republicans come from states that are solidly Republican. And I'll show you what I mean. This is a map of the 2012 presidential election. And notice the colors, red and blue. Red is Republican, blue is Democrat. If you want to know why those colors are applied to each party, in 1980, the NBC television network was broadcasting the election that year, and someone said, you know, I think most Americans today have color television. So why don't we make this more visually attractive and give the parties a color? And they decided to give the Republicans red and the Democrats blue. So when you hear a phrase like, oh, this is a blue state, means Democratic state. And you're wondering why those colors exist. It's because of television. Now, when you look at this map, and again, this is the 2012 presidential election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, the Republican candidate. You see Obama won 332 electoral votes. And since you need 270, he easily exceeded that. But when you look at the map, one of the things that strikes you is that there's a lot of red. Isn't there a lot of red there? So how could Obama won so easily? Well, he won so easily because if you look at the electoral votes, you see the numbers there. Most of the states that voted Republican have low electoral votes, especially in the Midwest and the Great Plains. Nobody lives there except for cows and horses. And they don't vote. So, the strength of the Democratic Party is in the Northeast, and then moving south and west, the industrial heartland of America, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And out west, the West Coast. So it's the East Coast up through Virginia, and the industrial belt of the Northeast and Midwest, and the West Coast. The South is solidly Republican, as is the Great Plains and Mountain states. But let's take a look at the 2016 presidential election. Okay. Donald Trump got 306 electoral votes. Again, that's more than 270, so he won. And we can see immediately how and why he won. If you look at that industrial heartland now, it's almost all red. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, all went Republican. In this industrial heartland, it is the heartland of the white working class of America. In 2012, the white working class voted for Obama. In 2016, the white working class voted for Donald Trump. And we can talk about why that's the case. So the challenge for the Democratic candidate in 2020, there are two challenges. One, to try to win back some of that industrial heartland. And secondly, and this is a little more difficult, to try to make inroads into these solidly Republican areas of the South and Mountain West. So what I did, I projected a 2020 electoral map. Now obviously it's not 2020 and the election is a year and a half away, but we have some numbers already. And here is my projection. Again, red is Democrat, blue is Republican. And if the election were held today, at this day in May, the Democratic candidate, whoever she or he might be, would probably win 274 electoral votes. Now, again, 270 is the magic number. So that means the Democrat would win, but it's really too close to make that projection. Notice the states that are light red and light blue. Those are the battleground states. States like Florida, Georgia, my state of North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada. This is where the election will be decided. In fact, no presidential candidate would ever campaign in California. What's the point? California is going to vote for the Democratic candidate, even if Mickey Mouse, the Democratic candidate, California, would vote for Mickey Mouse. Same in New York with 29 electoral votes. New York is solidly Democratic. Nobody is going to go to New York during the campaign. Or no candidate is going to go to, in the Deep South, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. That's solidly Republican. There is no way a Democratic candidate can ever win in those states. So what happens is the entire campaign becomes focused on 10 or 11 states. In 2016, in North Carolina, which is one of these so-called swing states that go either way, Donald Trump visited North Carolina 13 times. He visited California 0. So this is where the campaign will take place, and this is really the key to winning the election. Who wins these so-called battleground states? So keep that in mind. Now, who are the Democrats and who are the Republicans? GOP stands for Republicans. It's a shorthand, says Grand Old Party, and that name was given to the Republicans after the American Civil War. We're a divided country, even more so than we were in 2016. The Democrats tend to be younger, tend to be women, tend to be unmarried, multiracial. They tend to live in cities. They tend to be secular. They don't go to church much. Jewish and Muslim voters tend to vote for Democrats. Republicans are older. They're men. They're married. They're almost all white. And they live in small towns and on farms. They attend church regularly, and the core base of the Republican Party are white evangelical Protestants. Catholics go either way, Democrat or Republican, but they have been leaning more Republican in recent years. So keep these coalitions in mind as we go forward. Okay. Let's take a look at the 2018 midterm elections. That was the most recent election. We didn't elect a president, but we elected the entire lower house of Congress, as well as 1/3 of the Senate. Remember, red, Republican, blue, Democrat. So who voted for each party? You can see women, 56 to 46 over men in terms of support for the Democratic Party. That's a pretty big gap. And women tend to have a higher participation rate than men, 51 to 49%. Now in age, you can see that individuals over or under 49 years of age tend to support the Democratic Party. Again, younger people. Whereas older people tend to support the Republican Party, particularly those who are 65 and older. Now, I don't intend to be mean here and say something bad, but I have to say that those people over 65 are going to die sooner than the people under 65. So this is a problem for the Republican Party because dead voters can't vote, right? Okay. But the important thing to keep in mind is not only who votes for who, but do they vote? And the participation rate of those people over 65 is much higher than the participation rate of those who are between the ages of 18 and 24. So they carry more weight. Now, by race and ethnicity, the Republican Party is the white party. And you can see here 54 to 43%. Black people, African Americans, overwhelmingly Democratic, as are Hispanic and Asians. Again, the Democratic Party is multiracial. It's the party of cities. And look at suburban. Historically, the suburbs have been leaning Republican, but in 2016, and then again in this election in 2018, the suburbs supported Democrats. That's important because the suburbs have more population than any other geographic entity, including cities, and suburban voters vote. By college graduate and gender, you can see that at the very bottom, women who have a college education overwhelmingly favor the Democratic Party, whereas men who do not have a college education favor the Republican Party. Religion is very important in American political life. Now, our Constitution prohibits the fusion of church and state. It demands the separation of church and state. But it doesn't say anything about religion and politics. And many people, when they go to vote, vote their religious faith, not necessarily anything else. So, Protestant Christians, strongly Republican. Catholic, as I said, 50-50. You can see the 2018 figures. Jewish voters, 79% for Democrats in the 2018 midterm elections. And it's pretty much the same figure for Muslims as well. Now, what I'd like to draw your attention to is the religiously unaffiliated. This is the fastest growing category, especially among young people. More and more people, especially young people, are saying, I don't have any religion. And it's about 23% of the electorate. That's a fair number of people. And they are overwhelmingly Democratic. The base of the Republican Party, the white evangelical Christians, again, 75% for Republicans, only 22% for Democrats. Now, what this chart shows, you see the dark blue dots. These are communities, suburbs, in 2018 that switched from Republican to Democrat. And you can see the suburban switch there. Many suburban districts were flipped by Democrats. So that is, again, very important. Women are moving further away from the Republican Party. The Democratic Party is becoming the party of women. Then we can talk about why that is. Particularly look at white women with a college degree. Historically, white women with a college degree was about 50-50 for each political party. But look at 2018, 59 to 39. That's a huge difference. Okay. Turnout. The most important point, if you don't walk away from this program with anything, the most important point you should walk away with is that the key to the 2020 presidential election is turnout. That is, who is going to come out to vote. I could give you percentages of young people, of black people, of white people, all morning long. But if those groups don't come out to vote, then it's meaningless. So, take a look at this. The turnout in 2016 was 60% for the presidential election. That's pretty high. You can see that. The reason why it's not higher is that in some states, as I mentioned, the outcome, we know the outcome already. It's May 2019, and I can tell you that the Democratic candidate, whoever he or she is going to win California. That's the way it is. But look at the midterm election of 2018, the spike up, almost 50%. That's the highest since 1914, more than 100 years ago. And typically, the turnout in the midterm election predicts the turnout in the next presidential election, which of course will be next year. And a high turnout tends to favor the Democratic Party because, as I've said, the groups that tend not to turn out in high numbers, particularly younger voters and Hispanic voters, do come out and did come out in the 2018 midterm elections. I took two very different states, Georgia and Iowa, to look at the issue of turnout. Georgia is in the American South, and Iowa is in the upper Midwest. And it's the same pattern for both Georgia and Iowa. That is, older people, 65 and over, have the highest participation rates. Young people, the red line in both Georgia and Iowa, have the lowest participation rate. So the challenge for the Democratic Party candidate is to energize this younger group, which votes overwhelmingly for Democrats, to come to the polls. Now, I saw this in my own classroom. In 2008, my students were very enthusiastic. They were going to go out and vote for Barack Obama in 2008. In 2016, my students were, well, I don't know, I'm going to a party the night before, and if it rains, I don't have a ride. I just don't know if I'm going to vote. Keep in mind that Election Day in America is not a holiday. It comes on a Tuesday, and people work and go to school. So you have to make a special effort to go to vote. And if you have no motivation, as many of my students didn't have motivation in 2016, you just don't vote. Now, what usually happens in a presidential election is that both parties agree on what the main issues are, but they disagree on how to address those issues. But with our divisions in our society, the two parties can't even agree on what's important. You see, for Democrats, health care. We're way behind Europe, Asia, Latin America, in terms of providing universal health care. And that's a big issue for Democrats. See, it's a little further down for Republicans. Democrats are also interested in the way women are treated in U.S. society. And that's far down the Republican list. Investigation into Russian involvement in the 2016 U.S. election, that's not that important to Democrats, but it's totally unimportant to Republicans. Immigration, not that important to Democrats, very important to Republicans, and you can see the difference in each of these issues. Now, it used to be there were any election except for 1944, any election except for 1944, there used to be three issues: the economy, the economy, the economy. That's not true anymore, as the midterm elections proved, because the economy was doing very well, but the party in power lost. So, let's move quickly. You can see the approval rates of very high among Republicans. The Republican Party is the Trump Party. Very low among Democrats, blue, 12%. But the independents, and the independent voters are the largest bloc, 42%. So Trump needs to work on that to improve. You can see the party identification. Now we're a country of independence. The affiliation with the Democratic Party down to 29%, down to 27% for Republicans, and up to 42% for independents. What that tells you is that Americans are just fed up with both political parties. Here's a list of some of the Democratic candidates. I won't go through them, but Joe Biden, the former vice president, and Bernie Sanders, who ran in 2016 in the Democratic primary, they're currently in the lead, but that reflects name recognition more than anything else. We can talk about that. There's the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, and the campaign really begins with the primaries in February of 2020, and these are the list of the primaries. The primaries select the candidate, and the idea of the primaries is that people who vote in the primaries, you have to be a member. In most states, you have to be a member of a political party. And as I said, most voters are not. So the candidates don't necessarily reflect the broad electorate. Okay, you can see how different the parties are. The economy, Trump supporters said it's gotten worse. Clinton supporters says it's gotten better. U.S. standing in the world, 87% gotten worse. Democrats say, well, only 35%. And you can see this big divide among Democrats and Republicans. So, what I can leave you with is that we are a divided country. And although Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are leading currently, I don't think either one will be the Democratic Party nominee. What unites the Democrats is their desire to beat Trump. And whether that will mean a candidate from the left of the Democratic Party or more toward the center remains to be determined. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
A question about Ukraine, just your opinion.
Ukraine, right. My grandparents, of course, were from Ukraine, and we were all excited in Charlotte, particularly in the Jewish community, which has a very strong representation from Ukraine, about the election in Ukraine of Mr. Zelensky. That was just recently held when he won 75% of the vote. And we are very hopeful that Ukraine, which has been identified as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, will be able to right itself and be allowed to flourish as it should. Now, of course, my grandparents always referred to themselves as Russians, not Ukrainians. They spoke Russian because when they lived in Ukraine, it was part of the Russian Empire. But some accommodation is going to have to occur between Russia and Ukraine in order for Ukraine to be a viable state. So it's a big job for the new leader of Ukraine, but I know in my community in North Carolina, we are very hopeful. Okay, any other questions? Well, then let me ask you a question. Who would you vote for in 2020 if you were in America and could vote? For the Democrat, you say? Okay, why?
What's wrong? You can talk.
No, I guess most people will vote for Democrats because they're against Donald Trump, as you said. So yeah, I guess against Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that's the sentiment of many voters. The Democrats have to be very careful not to nominate a candidate that is so far left that it will turn off people who are in the center. But we will see what happens.
Do you think the Democrats could have a younger candidate?
I think it would be a good idea. is possible. There are a number of younger candidates in the field. I think that would be a good idea because, as I indicated, the younger people, those people under 39 years of age, tend to vote Democratic, and a younger candidate would energize this group. The key to any election in America is get out the vote. Turn out, turn out, turn out. Yeah.
What is your opinion about the abortion laws that are now being discussed?
Oh, great question. Since 1973, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Roe versus Wade, abortions have been legal in the U.S. And the U.S. Supreme Court has generally upheld that decision. Now, however, several states, conservative states, particularly in the American South, have passed legislation that effectively ends abortion. These states will be challenged, and the cases will eventually go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Why now? Because the Supreme Court now has a conservative majority with Donald Trump's nomination of Neil Gorsuch and Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the feeling is that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch will provide a majority that will maybe not overturn Roe versus Wade, but will severely restrict the rights of women to have abortions. And this is one of many reasons why women voters are leaving the Republican Party. Okay, thank you all very much.
We can have a picture.
Okay.